Welcome, my dears. Come in from the cold and pull up a comfortable chair by the warm fireplace. For 20 long years, the worn, weather-beaten envelope lay hidden in the dark, waiting patiently for the exact perfect moment to break a man's heart and, perhaps, to save his soul. The wealthy, successful son who had completely forgotten the humble woman who gave him everything had absolutely no idea that a single, fragile piece of paper was about to shatter his carefully constructed, hollow world. If you enjoy stories that warm the heart and leave you with a valuable lesson, subscribe to Nanny Granny's Golden Tales and become part of our storytelling family. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading every comment. Our story begins in a city of glass and steel, where the buildings scrape the sky, and the people rarely look up to see the clouds. Here lived Arthur Pendelton. At 42 years old, Arthur was a man who possessed everything money could buy. He was the CEO of a massive investment firm, a man whose phone never stopped ringing, whose schedule was booked months in advance, and whose tailored suits cost more than most people earned in a decade. Yet if you looked closely into Arthur's eyes, past the sharp confidence and the businesslike glare, you would see an undeniable emptiness. His life was an endless series of transactions. He had colleagues, but no friends. He had overwhelming luxury, but no true comfort. He possessed a sprawling penthouse that looked out over millions of people, yet he had never felt more completely alone in the world. But Arthur was not always this way. Long ago, before the harsh city swallowed his heart, he was just a boy from the small, whispering town of Oakhaven. And in Oakhaven lived Elara, his mother. Elara was a woman woven from the very fabric of kindness. She was the town seamstress. Her hands were always pricked with silver needles, her fingertips calloused and rough, but her touch was the softest thing Arthur had ever known. After Arthur's father passed away when the boy was barely 5 years old, Elara had taken on the profound weight of the world, balancing it effortlessly on her slender shoulders so her son would never feel the burden of their poverty. She worked by the dim light of a flickering oil lamp long into the midnight hours, mending torn trousers, sewing beautiful dresses for the wealthy folks in the neighboring towns, saving every single extra penny she earned in a rusted tin jar beneath the floorboards. "This is for your wings, my little bird," she would whisper tenderly, kissing his forehead as he slept, "so that one day you can fly far beyond these quiet hills." And fly he did. When Arthur turned 18, the heavy tin jar was finally opened. The countless coins and crumpled bills were just enough to send him to a prestigious university in the city. The morning of his departure was crisp and golden, the autumn leaves falling like bright rain around the small Oakhaven train station. "I'll write to you every single week, Ma," Arthur had promised, his youthful face streaked with tears, his voice trembling with the terrifying excitement of the great unknown. Elara had smiled, a beautiful, brave smile that carefully hid the absolute devastation of letting her only child go into the world alone. She adjusted the collar of his coat, her rough hands lingering on his shoulders. "You just focus on your studies, Arthur. Build a good life, a beautiful life. And remember, no matter how high you fly, the ground will always be here to catch you." For the first year, Arthur kept his promise. Long letters flowed back and forth. But as the demanding years of university turned into the aggressive, fast-paced years of building his corporate career, the letters began to slow. Weekly letters turned into monthly updates. Monthly updates turned into brief, hurried phone calls on holidays, and then the calls became missed calls. The letters stopped altogether. Arthur told himself he was just too busy. He was building his empire. He promised himself that as soon as he closed his next big deal, he would go back and visit. Just one more promotion, just one more merger, just one more million. He sent a generous check on her birthday every year, assuming the money would speak for his love. But he never sent a return address, constantly moving from luxury apartment to luxury apartment, always chasing the next peak. Without realizing it, Arthur had built an impenetrable fortress around himself, brick by shiny brick, until the memory of the warm, lamp-lit cottage in Oakhaven felt like a distant dream belonging to another lifetime entirely. He had successfully buried his past under mountains of paperwork and stock reports. He had forgotten. Until a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 20 years after he had left Oakhaven, Arthur was sitting at his grand mahogany desk, reviewing a tedious corporate contract, when his diligent assistant, Eleanor, softly knocked on the heavy glass door. She held a silver tray with the morning mail, but there was a strange, almost hesitant look on her face. "Mr. Pendelton," she said softly, stepping into the sprawling office. "I apologize for interrupting your afternoon. The mailroom brought this up separately. It's highly unusual." Arthur didn't bother to look up from his papers. "Just leave it on the tray, Eleanor. I'll get to it when I have a spare moment." "Sir," she insisted gently, her voice wavering, "I really think you should look at it right now. It was forwarded by a private investigator from your previous bank, and the postmark is dated exactly 2 decades ago." That made Arthur stop. He slowly put down his expensive silver pen and looked up. Eleanor extended the tray. Resting upon the gleaming metal was a delicate, pale yellow envelope. It was heavily battered, the edges frayed and curled, water-stained and dusty with age. The postage stamp was an old design that hadn't been in circulation for years. But it was the handwriting that made the air suddenly rush out of Arthur's lungs. The elegant, looping cursive, the familiar slant of the letters. It was his name, written in the faded ink of a woman whose hands had worked tirelessly to give him everything. It was Elara's handwriting. Arthur's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. A sudden, violent wave of guilt, sharp and suffocating, crashed over his chest. He realized, with a sickening drop in his stomach, that it had been 10 long years since he had last thought to check on her. 10 years since the bank had quietly returned one of his checks marked "Recipient Unknown." He had hired an investigator briefly, but when a major corporate crisis hit, he had buried the investigation in a drawer and simply never followed up. He had chosen his blinding ambition over his mother. "Thank you, Eleanor. Please hold all my calls for the rest of the day," Arthur whispered, his voice cracking, entirely devoid of his usual commanding tone. Eleanor nodded respectfully and quietly closed the heavy door behind her, leaving Arthur utterly alone in the vast, silent room. He stared at the envelope for a long time. The paper felt unbelievably fragile in his hands, like a dried autumn leaf that might crumble to dust if held too tightly. With absolute agonizing care, he slid his silver letter opener beneath the flap and pulled out 3 pages of closely written stationery. "My dearest Arthur," the letter began. If you are reading this, it means my time in this beautiful world has come to a gentle close, and Mr. Higgins down at the post office has finally tracked you down to deliver my final words." Arthur choked back a sudden sob, his eyes burning as the reality of her passing slammed into him with the force of a speeding train. The mother he had meant to visit next month, next year, next decade, was gone. He wiped his eyes fiercely and forced himself to continue reading. "Please, my beautiful boy, do not let your heart be troubled with guilt. I know how the world moves. I know how the city sings a loud, captivating song that can easily drown out the quiet whispers of home. I never once blamed you for not coming back. I watched you fly from afar, reading every single newspaper clipping about your tremendous successes that I could find. I pasted them all into a heavy scrapbook. My son, the great businessman. My heart swelled with so much pride, it almost burst." If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like the video. It helps these stories reach more people who need a little inspiration today. Now, let us return to Arthur and his life-changing letter. Arthur continued to read, the heavy tears now falling freely onto the polished mahogany desk. "But Arthur," the letter continued, "while you were busy conquering the world, I had a little journey of my own. You see, the generous checks you sent me over the years, I never spent a single penny of them on myself. The little house gave me shelter, and my sewing gave me enough bread. I didn't need wealth. But our town of Oakhaven, it needed so much." Arthur's brow furrowed in deep confusion. He read the next lines with growing astonishment. "I used your generous gifts to repair the collapsing roof of the old schoolhouse. I used them to buy warm winter coats for the children down in the valley whose parents had lost their jobs at the mill. I used them to start a lovely community garden so that the elderly would never go hungry in the bitter winters. I did it all in your name, Arthur. To the people of Oakhaven, you are not the boy who left and forgot them. You are the invisible guardian angel who saved them." Arthur dropped the letter, burying his face in his trembling hands. The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of his mother's grace completely broke him. While he was ruthlessly building a fortune, consumed entirely by greed and status, she was quietly building a legacy of pure love, giving him all the credit. He picked up the final page. "There is one last thing, my son. Under the old floorboard beneath my sewing machine, I left a small wooden box. It contains my final gift to you. Not money, for you have plenty of that, but something infinitely more valuable. Come back to Oakhaven, Arthur. Come back to the ground that is waiting to catch you." Arthur didn't hesitate for another second. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't care about the plunging stock market. He didn't care about the critical board meeting scheduled for tomorrow. And he didn't care about his massive empire. He grabbed his coat, left his office without a word to anyone, and drove his car out of the suffocating city. The long drive took hours, as the concrete skyscrapers slowly faded into rolling green hills and dense, colorful autumn forests. Arthur felt a strange, terrifying lightness taking root in his chest. The air grew fresher, smelling strongly of pine needles and wood smoke. When he finally drove past the welcome sign of Oakhaven, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the sleepy town. It had changed, yet it remained beautifully the same. The streets were paved now, the storefronts freshly painted, but the ancient towering oak tree still stood proudly in the center of the town square. Arthur parked his car and walked toward the old post office. A brass bell jingled cheerfully as he pushed the wooden door open. An older man with thick silver hair and round spectacles looked up from sorting a mountain of brown packages. "Excuse me," Arthur said, his voice completely raw. "I'm looking for Mr. Higgins." The man smiled warmly, a kind crinkling forming around his eyes. "Old Mr. Higgins passed away 5 years ago, God rest his good soul. I'm Samuel, his nephew. Took over the shop. How can I help you, stranger?" "My name is Arthur Pendelton," he said quietly. Samuel's eyes widened massively behind his thick glasses. He immediately dropped the heavy package he was holding, rushing out from behind the counter. "Arthur Pendelton? Elara's boy? The great benefactor?" Yes," Arthur stammered, overwhelmed by the man's profound and immediate reaction. "Good heavens above," Samuel beamed, vigorously shaking Arthur's hand. "We've wondered for years if you'd ever come back. Your mother was a saint, Mr. Pendelton, an absolute saint on earth. And you, what you did for this town through her. We owe you a debt of gratitude that can never, ever be repaid." Arthur felt a sharp, agonizing sting of shame. He hadn't done anything. It was all her doing. "Samuel," Arthur asked gently, "the letter I just received, it was postmarked 20 years ago. Why did it just arrive today?" Samuel sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's a bit of a tragedy, I'm afraid. You see, when your mother passed, she gave the letter to my Uncle Higgins, but you had moved, and the big city bank wouldn't disclose your new address to a small-town postmaster. Uncle Higgins put the letter in his special iron safe, vowing to hand-deliver it the moment he found out where you were. But his mind started failing him. He forgot the combination. Eventually, he forgot the letter entirely." Samuel continued. "Last month, we were renovating the back room. We finally cracked the old safe open, and there it was, sitting in the dark. I tracked down your company through the internet and sent it off with a prayer. I'm so incredibly glad it found you." Arthur nodded, a profound gratitude washing over his sorrow. "Thank you, Samuel. Can you tell me who lives in my mother's old house now?" "Oh, nobody lives there," Samuel smiled softly. "The town bought it to preserve it. We turned it into the town library and community center. It's called the Elara Pendelton House. Come, I'll walk you there right now." As they walked down the familiar cobblestone street, citizens of Oakhaven nodded and smiled. Arthur felt entirely out of place in his expensive designer suit, yet deeply, strangely at home. They approached the small cottage. It was immaculate. Fresh flowers bloomed vibrantly in the window boxes, and warm, inviting light poured from the windows. Inside, the house was filled with towering rows of books. A group of children sat on a colorful rug, listening intently to a young woman reading a story. The woman had bright, kind eyes and a gentle smile. She looked up as Samuel and Arthur entered the room. "Martha," Samuel called out quietly, "I brought a visitor. I think you'll want to meet him." The young woman closed the book, instructing the children to browse the shelves quietly, and walked over. "Hello," she said, her voice sounding like a soft melody. "Martha, this is Arthur Pendelton." Martha gasped loudly, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears instantly sprang to her eyes. "Arthur! Oh, my goodness!" She stepped forward and, without a single moment of hesitation, wrapped her arms around him in a tight, comforting embrace. Arthur stood frozen for a second before awkwardly returning the hug, utterly confused. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Do I know you?" Martha pulled back, wiping a joyful tear from her cheek. "No, you don't know me, but I know you. When I was 8 years old, my father died in a terrible accident at the mill. My mother was terrified we would lose our home. We had absolutely nothing. Then your mother came to our door. She handed us an envelope of money and said it was a gift from her son in the city. You saved my family, Arthur. You paid for my college education. That's exactly why I came back to teach here, to honor your mother, to honor you." Arthur could no longer hold back the flood of tears. He wept openly, right there in the middle of the small library, mourning the precious years he had lost, the incredible woman he had neglected, and the utterly profound grace she had shown him. He wept for the sweet boy he used to be, and the cold, unfeeling man he had become. After he composed himself, Martha led him to the back corner of the room. "We kept her sewing corner exactly as it was," she explained softly. There it was, the old, sturdy wooden table, the heavy cast-iron sewing machine, the worn fabric chair. Arthur knelt on the polished wood floor. He remembered the final lines of the letter. "Under the old floorboard beneath my sewing machine." He pressed his fingers against the wood. One board felt slightly loose. With trembling hands, he pried it up. Beneath it, nestled in a small, hollowed-out space, was a beautifully carved, dark wooden box. He pulled it out, dusting it off carefully. The small brass latch clicked open with a soft sigh. Inside, resting on a bed of faded blue velvet, was a silver pocket watch. It was his father's watch. Arthur had completely forgotten about it. But there was something else, a small, folded piece of paper tucked inside the lid. Arthur opened it. It read, "Time is the only currency that truly matters, my son. You cannot earn it back, and you cannot buy more of it. Do not spend it solely on building wealth that you cannot take with you. Spend it on love, spend it on kindness, spend it on the people who matter. The watch is stopped at the exact hour you left Oakhaven. Wind it up, Arthur. Start your time again." Arthur stared at the silver face of the watch. The delicate hands were frozen at exactly 8:15. The exact moment his train had pulled away from the station 20 years ago. The moment he had stopped truly living and started merely achieving. Slowly, deliberately, Arthur reached up and gripped the small winding dial. He turned it, once, twice, 3 times. Tick, tick, tick. The watch sprang beautifully back to life, its steady, rhythmic heartbeat vibrating warmly in the palm of his hand. Arthur closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. For the first time in decades, the crushing, invisible weight upon his chest vanished completely. Arthur didn't return to the city the next day, or the day after that. He called his lawyers, instructing them to begin the long, complicated process of selling his shares in the investment firm. He didn't want the penthouse. He didn't want the impressive title. He wanted his life back. He moved back to Oakhaven permanently. He bought a small, modest house near the edge of the Whispering Woods. He used his vast wealth not to buy more luxury for himself, but to establish a grand foundation in Elara's name. They built a new hospital wing. They provided full scholarships for every single child in Oakhaven who wanted to go to university. He spent his days at the community center, helping Martha read to the children, listening to their joyous laughter, feeling the tremendous warmth of true human connection. The cold, distant CEO died the day that letter was opened. In his place stood a man who finally understood the true, profound meaning of success. Arthur became a beloved fixture of the town, always ready with a kind word, a generous donation, or simply a listening ear for anyone in need. Every Sunday morning, regardless of the weather, Arthur would walk up the quiet, winding path to the town cemetery resting on the hill. He would bring a fresh bouquet of bright wildflowers, the kind his mother always loved, and place them gently by her headstone. He would sit by the green grass, take out the silver pocket watch, listen to its steady ticking, and talk to her. He told her about his week. He told her about the children at the library. He told her about the hospital. But most importantly, he thanked her. He thanked her for never giving up on him. He thanked her for waiting. He thanked her for giving him the greatest gift a parent could ever give a child, the magnificent gift of redemption. You see, my dear friends, life has a very funny way of trying to teach us what is truly important. We get so terribly caught up in the hustle, in the running, in the exhausting climbing of ladders that lead only to empty rooms. We chase gold and status and the fleeting applause of strangers, while completely ignoring the steady, quiet, faithful love of those who cheer for us the loudest. Arthur learned, in the most painful yet beautiful way possible, that true wealth is never found in a bank account. True wealth is found in the lives we touch, the heavy burdens we ease, and the tremendous love we leave behind when our time comes to an end. It is never too late to wind the watch. It is never too late to start your time again. It is never too late to remember those who loved you first. And that, my dear friends, is why a kind heart is worth infinitely more than all the gold in the entire world. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Nanny Granny's Golden Tales for more timeless tales and endless wisdom. And tell me in the comments, what lesson did you learn from today's story?